Hi, Glenn Samuel here. Look, today I want to talk to you about 6 mistakes that I see people making within their landscape photography, and quite frankly I still make some of these mistakes and I think, oh geez, I've got to fix that up. But this is just my thoughts on what I see, what I hear and what I read from other photographers, and these 6 mistakes are made quite often out in the field. So the first mistake, the very first mistake, is a tripod. Now people, I see this time and time again, they'll go out and spend anywhere between $2,000 and $4,000 on a camera and lens, and they'll buy a $125 or $150 tripod. That's just not the way to go. For me, my tripods, I like tripods to be that can go very high. I'm over 6 foot, and 9 times out of 10 that means I'm shooting at eye level. But one good thing about tripods is that it enables you to get that camera as steady as possible. So when you're buying a tripod, make sure you spend a bit of money, because a poorly built tripod, 1, won't last. 2, if you're near water or sand or mud and there's vibration or even wind, a light tripod's just not going to cut it and you'll end up with blurry images. So the tripod is very, very important. Make sure the height of the tripod suits your height. Now, I often see photographers with shorter tripods leaning down like this, and I'm thinking, oh, guys, in years to come your backs are going to be no good. So always look at the height of the tripod and the quality of the tripod. So the second free tip on that is to, when I arrive at a location, and I did a video a couple of weeks ago on this, I always grab a hold of the camera out of the camera bag and I walk around and I look at composition, which will lead into point number 2 in a moment. But walk around with the camera, try and look for your composition before you put your camera on the tripod, because that'll save you a lot of time on the day. So always look around your area, grab your camera, don't put it on the tripod, work out your composition, and then, and only then, put your camera on your tripod. Number 2, bad composition. I often see people, they arrive at a location and they don't really think about their composition, because a bad composition, what that entails, it has everything in it. There's no main subject, or there's no main focal point that leads your viewer's eye into the image. With a bad composition, you're just creating a flat image. A good composition has layers. And when you have a good composition with layers, that means that when the person's looking at your images, it draws them in, it draws them into the picture. So really look at your composition before you do anything else. And hence that's point number 1, where you take your camera out of your camera bag and walk around and look at your composition first. So concentrate on your composition. Now, another thing, point number 3, is wonky horizons. Now, I've fallen for this trick many, many times. And you take the image and you've got everything set up, you come home, you put it in the computer here, and your horizon line's like that, and you think, my God, how did I make that mistake? And sure, you can correct it in post, Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever, but it's a good idea to try and get it right out in the field. I'm a firm believer of 90% right in camera, 10% editing. And if you can get that right in the field, it just saves you so much more time. For me, I use a little spirit level, and I've shown people this before, which sits on the hot shoe of the camera. And that way I'm looking at my live view screen, I'm looking at the spirit level on top of the camera, and it's one motion. Where I know what you're saying, these modern day cameras have that adjustment inside the camera, but it just means going through settings and trying to find it. It just, once again, takes up too much time. So I like to use the little spirit level on top of my camera. You can check out my other videos. I did a video on that not that too long ago, actually. So it's a little spirit level on top of the camera, and it just alleviates any problems with wonky horizon as I'm looking through the live view on the back of the camera and I'm gauging it with the spirit level on top. So look out for wonky horizons. Wide angle lenses. Now, yes, I do shoot with wide angles, anywhere from 14mm up to about 18mm, but you have to be very careful how you use them. A lot of people think landscape photographers need wide angle lenses to put that whole scene in perspective, but the problem with this is that if you haven't got any foreground element, everything in the image just seems too far away and very small. So the idea is, if you're going to use a wide angle lens, make sure you have something in front of you, something in the midground, and then let the background take care of itself. For me, I would say probably 40% of my landscape photography is with the 17-40 Canon L lens, f4. But 9 times out of 10, I'm using the 24-105 because at 24mm, I can crop very well from 24 up to the 105, and I can crop things out of the image that I don't need. With a wide angle, you still have to be very, very careful because you're bringing in everything in. But wide angle lenses in landscape photography are excellent, but you've got to know how to use them, and you've got to know what your composition's doing within the frame. So be very, very careful with your wide angle lenses, but they are great to use, don't get me wrong, but a little bit extra focal length certainly helps in some instances. So once again, wide angle lenses are great, but you have to be very careful how you use them. If you do use a wide angle lens with your landscape photography, make sure you include a foreground element. Bad light. Now, this is a very touchy subject with photographers. There's no such thing as bad light. It's just that the thing or the composition that people want to photograph, it doesn't match the available light. Now, for me, if I'm going to photograph a waterfall, I prefer it to be cloudy, overcast. If I'm going to photograph like I did last week, around the seascape sort of images, I need a nice sunrise. Now, bad light really doesn't exist with photography. It's how we use the available light that's the most important thing here. Now, I see a lot of people, they turn up, they've got a great composition. They've gone through all the processes, ticked all the boxes, but the image they're about to take will be fairly mediocre because they haven't pre-planned as to what the light will be on that particular day at that particular location. Now, I know we're all short of time, I know that. But for me, I start planning my landscape photography shoots 4 days prior to the actual day. That way I'm following the weather. I can see what the weather's doing, especially with waterfalls. If there's been rain around, I know they're going to be running. But it's more about the light. And for me, photography is all about light. So there's not really bad light. It's just that we don't know how to work with the light that's available. So you've got to make sure that your composition matches the available light. Now, an example, waterfalls don't really look good when it's bright sunshine. They just doesn't work. It looks very flat. But give me an overcast day in a waterfall and you can create images if you've got that light that are just outstanding, really. So you've got to pay attention to the light and your subject. You've got to match your subject to the available light. So there really isn't any bad light really in photography. It's just that our composition doesn't match the available light. Unwanted details in an image. Now, I often see photos or images where the composition's really good, but around the frame there might be a tree branch or leaves, or there could be a rock just sticking out of the left hand or right hand frame, and that's very distracting. So this sort of like ties in with composition. Look at your frame before you actually take the shot. Look around that square, look around it and see if there's anything protruding in to the image. If you can eliminate that and you've got a good composition matched with the right light, you'll have a good shot. You'll take some good shots. So always look for what I call unwanted details or distractions within your frame, because that'll show when you start doing your editing. Yes, you can crop it in, but keep in mind, the more you crop, really the more damage you're doing to that file. So please look at the outside edges. And the last one is about histograms. A lot of people don't know what the histogram is or does, or where even to find it in their camera. But I urge you to study a histogram. Now, if you're in a situation where your foreground's very dark and the background's very bright, that means that the camera will meter for that brightness. So you'll have a blown out highlight, and you really don't want to blow out your highlights, because you virtually cannot recover them in post-edit. It's almost impossible. I use a lot of filtration to calm down highlights, so it's more manageable in the end. If you're using something like a Canon 5D Mark IV or a Nikon D850, they handle that situation very, very well. You can correct it in post, or you can do multiple exposures, but I like to try and get it right in the camera 90% of the time and have 10% your editing at the end of the day. But really pay attention to your histogram. Too much to the left, your darks will be very, very dark. Too much to the right, and your highlights will be blown out. You've got to get it somewhere in between. There is another thing called ETTR, which is exposed to the right, where you push your histogram to the right and you're slightly overexposing your highlights, and your shadows stay dark. When you come time to edit, you can bring up the darkness or the shadows in that image, and that's a very good technique to use or to learn. ETTR, exposed to the right, that's what it stands for. But try and get that histogram really well worked out, and look at the histogram just before you take the shot, because that will dictate in the end exactly what you're going to end up with. And keeping in mind, if you do know about a histogram, when you're looking at a histogram on the back of your camera, that's a JPEG file. It's not until you put it into your editing program, because you're shooting in RAW, that you can regather information. But the histogram's very, very important, and I use it all the time on every shot that I take, especially with landscape photography, of course. And 9 times out of 10, it's just about right. So study your histogram. So there are 5 or 6 things that I see people doing wrong, and I hope you can take something from this video. But please remember, get a good tripod, look at your horizon line, either inside your camera or with a spirit level on top of your hot shoe. Look at bad composition, make sure your composition is perfect. Bad light, no such thing as bad light in photography. Work with the light you've got, but pick the subject to suit the light. Wide angle lenses are great. As I said, I use them, but not all the time. If you use a wide angle lens, or you want to use a wide angle lens, make sure your composition's right, and make sure you've got something in the foreground to lead the viewer's eye into the image. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very flat if there's nothing in front of you. And unwanted details. Once again, make sure there's nothing creeping into the corners or the sides or from the top or the bottom of that square, which is your viewfinder. So that's it for another episode of Sniper Photography. If you've got any questions or anything like that, please leave them down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell next door so you don't miss anything. But that's about it for me today. And as I always say, be nice to yourself, family and friends, but most of all, you keep shooting, keep smiling, and have fun. Bye for now.